Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Alka Halberg. I am part of the Cohesive Marketing team. I will be assisting the team today with the webinar as moderator. We will give it another 30 to 60 seconds to allow all the attendees to join us on this call. Right, I think we can start. Welcome to our next webinar in the Cohesive Maximo Back to Basics webinar series. Our aim for this webinar series is to highlight existing base Maximo functionality and features that your organization may not be using today to help you maximize your return on investment. We will be presenting this content in the Maximo application suite to give you an opportunity to see MAS and specifically the managed application. Our focus for this series will be on functional topics with plans to incorporate more technical topics in the future. Note that this webinar will be recorded and distributed post-webinar. All the attendees are currently set to listen-only mode, but feel free to post any questions or comments in the chat or question box. Should you have any technical questions or problems, please log it with the GoToWebinar technical team in the form of a question mark or help section on the panel itself. I will be handing you over to the host in a bit, but let me do a quick introduction of Cohesive first. Cohesive helps owner-operators embed digital ways of working that drive operational efficiency and enhance asset performance across all stages of the lifecycle. We at Cohesive draw on core tech solutions to support our clients. These solutions include Bentley's Infrastructure Cloud, Bentley iTwin, and IBM Maximo, for which Cohesive is the largest implementer. Without further ado, let's dive in and hand over to our host for today, Nadia Bahari. Nadia, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Alki. That was a great introduction of Cohesive. So my name is Nadia. I've been with Cohesive for just over 3 years as a Maximo consultant, primarily with technical background, working on topics such as integrations, reporting, auto scripts, and troubleshooting. I've had the opportunity to work on a variety of different sectors, and I'm excited to be presenting today on the topic of Start Centers. So here is our agenda for today. We'll be looking at what Start Centers are, what is their purpose, why should they be used, an overview of the Start Center functionality, how to apply Start Center templates, and some best practices when working with Start Centers. Then we're going to be doing a demonstration, and lastly, we'll have some time for Q&A. Okay, so let's dive in and look at what Start Centers are. Start Centers are the first thing users are going to see when opening Maximo Manage. They should be quick and show essential information. Each user can have multiple different Start Centers shown as the tabs at the top of the screen. These are role-based templates that are created to support users' daily operations and work responsibilities. This includes helping users understand what needs to be addressed that day and showing useful information and data for their role. Start Centers allow for quick access to these options. Now, let's take a look at how Start Centers work, more specifically, how they are set up. First, the administrator creates a template that is set to one or more security groups. Once a user is assigned to that security group, they will see the Start Center tab when they log in. Templates give the administrator the option to create well-designed, efficient Start Centers that many users can use and edit for themselves. Next, we're looking at creating portlets. Start Centers or Start Center templates contain various portlets. These can be created or updated. These are the different sections on a Start Center that show data. Methods of showing data depend on the portlet type. Portlets have numerous functionalities, including allowing users to create new records, open applications with a single click, run reports, view records that need their attention, and see data in graph or list form. Lastly, user-based changes. Once a user is assigned to a security group, if they have the access, they can edit the Start Center themselves. This will not change the template that all users have, which means it'll not cause issues for others, and it can be overwritten with a template later if needed. While security changes can restrict what edits a user can make to their personal Start Center, they could still make an inefficient portlet or add too much information, which slows down the system. This is when overwriting the template is used. Now, let's take a look at why should Start Centers be used? What is the advantage of using Start Centers? Why should you use Start Centers? Start Centers can increase the efficiency of users by allowing many of their daily operations to be initiated or even completed from the starting page of Maximo Manage. They can see what records need their attention via the inbox assignment portlet, see if work order completion time is at a good rate via view KPI graphs, and run reports, all from this main page. Start Centers are typically managed by Maximo administrators, giving them the choice of which functionality general users will have. These slides will go over almost all of the functionality in the Start Centers application. However, this does not mean all users will have access to everything shown. Portlets such as favorite applications, quick insert, and report list allow users to easily open an app, create a new record, or run a report with a simple click. There's no need to find the application in the sidebar and look for the specific record to run a report on daily. KPI graph, KPI list, and result set portlets are query-based and give the option to view graphs, data, or records immediately. This lets the user judge what they need to work on and, if they are an administrator, who or what they need to check on to make sure everything is working correctly. The bulletin board and inbox assignment portlets give the users messages sent out from the system, as well as what records need attention. Administrators can send out messages to users to warn about downtime, outages, or upgrades happening in the future. If workflows are set up in the environment, any assigned to the user will be shown. Now, let's look at an overview of Start Centers, more specifically the portlets that can be added. There are 8 different kinds. Any number can be added of each type, but it is recommended to not have a large amount of portlets. 3 to 5 is a recommended number. Keeping the Start Center clean and easy to look at provides users the best experience. These 4 portlets are really simple. All of them have little to edit if the user has that access. The first one we're going to take a look at is Quick Insert. This allows you to create a new record on any application that you have access to. It'll take you to the corresponding page of the new entry. When editing this portlet, there are only 3 options: action, description, and order. These are choosing what type of record to create, such as new person or create service request, setting a text description for that action. So that would be basically what the user sees in that portlet corresponding to the action. This may need to be updated for applications that are custom or cloned. And lastly, choosing what order it shows up on in the list. Next, we're going to take a look at the favorite applications portlet. This opens the application in list view without having to use the side menu. When editing this portlet, there are only 2 options: choosing which applications to open, which the user will need access to or they won't see the application, and the order. Inbox assignment portlets are used only for workflow. It tells the user which records need their attention. The only edits we can make here are which columns of the workflow show up in the portlet. You can see in the example we have description, due date, priority, etc. For report list, this allows users to run reports directly from the Start Center instead of having to go to the corresponding application. Similar to favorite applications, we only have 2 edits available: choosing which reports and the order they show up on in the list. We have two portlets related to KPIs. They have little to nothing to edit themselves. Choosing which KPIs to show is the only option available. KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator. These need to be created in either the KPI Manager or KPI Template applications. If these are not created here first, there is nothing to do with the KPI portlets. There will be another webinar where we go into KPIs in more detail. KPI list shows the results of one or more KPIs in a list view. The list only shows these values: actual, target, and variance. Actual being the current measurement, recorded value, or count at this point in time. Target pertaining to the KPI itself, which is set on the KPI. And variance being the difference between the actual and target. The KPI graph portlet can do the same as KPI list, but it'll also show a graph to give a more visual understanding of the data. Having one KPI will show a meter graph, such as the one on screen. More than one KPI will show a bar graph. The last two portlets we're going to take a look at are a bit different. Bulletin board will show messages sent out by administrators directed at either everyone in the system or specific organization, site, or person groups. This could be for outages, upgrades, or anything else. Bulletin board has its own application, and this portlet cannot be edited at all. The results set portlet shows a list of records. This can be shown as a chart instead of a list, and the chart can be set as the default view if desired. This portlet takes a bit more to set up than most, and we'll talk about it shortly, as well as the queries and object structures that are needed for this portlet. Now we're going to take a look at modifying start centers. The ability to edit a start center is something a user may or may not have. An organization can choose to disable this feature for anyone other than the Maximo administrator. If a user does have this access, there are two different kinds that can be granted: editing a personal start center that belongs to themselves, or editing the start center template. The changes that can be made are the same for both types if the user has full edit access. When modifying a personal start center, the user can have full access to create or remove portlets, change the order of those portlets, and change start center names and layout. The Change Content Layout button in the top right of their personal start center is where the layout and name of the start center is changed. This also allows portlets to be added or removed, the order of the portlets to be changed, and the name of each portlet to be changed. Another button in the top right is the Display Settings button. This allows a user to change which of their start centers are visible, change the names, and set one to default for themselves. The default start center is the one that's seen upon initial login or initially opening the start centers. The Is Mobile column that'll show up shows if the start center is visible on mobile. Remember that all of these changes for the personal start center will be visible only by the logged in user that changed them. For each portlet, the Edit Portlet button will be visible when you hover over the top right. This gives the edit options for that portlet, which is different for each portlet type. Some options include changing which app the portlet is showing data for, which fields show up in the portlet, and what actions are available from the portlet. When working with templates, this will be visible by all users. If an existing template is modified, everyone who has that template will see these changes once they update their Start Center. When clicking the Modify Existing Templates button, a list of all templates will be given. This is where one can be deleted or chosen to be edited. The same options are available when editing a template as when editing a personal Start Center. For the users to see the changes of a template, they must click the Update Start Center button in the top right. This will overwrite all the personal changes that they've made to their Start Center. Now we're going to take a look at queries. These are used in the KPI list, KPI graph, and result set portlets. The queries for KPI list and KPI graph come from the KPI manager and KPI template applications, which will be covered in a different webinar. The result set queries come from the desired application, such as work orders, assets, purchase requisitions, etc. When creating a query, the list view and more search fields can be used as a basis to add filters. Once Save Current Query is selected, a name and description are required. Once saved, this will show in the SQL where clause in View and Manage Queries. This is accessible via the three dots at the top next to the magnifying glass. And then from the drop-down, clicking View and Manage Queries. And then in the resulting dialog, you'll see the where clause once you expand the details. The query can always be edited afterwards if the logged-in user is the owner. If a user's organization allows access to creating public queries, be sure to set the query to public if creating one for a Start Center template. Creating a non-public query is fine if used on a personal edited Start Center. If a non-public query is saved to a template, other users will see the portlet as if it has not been set up. When creating queries for Start Centers, be sure to make them specific. They should not return a large number of records or take too long to load. If so, this will slow down the speed of the Start Center as a whole, causing users to have to wait when entering Maximo Manage. Now we're going to take a look at object structures. These represent the database tables that store data in Maximo. They can be used to import and export data, but for Start Centers, they are used in the result set portlet to change what fields are available to choose from. This will be explained shortly. Typically, the Maximo administrators are the only users that can access object structures. Most applications will have one set up with the default data. Some have multiple object structures. If a specific connection or object structure is needed, one will likely need to be created or requested to be created by Maximo administrators. When creating an object structure for a Start Center, two fields are required to have specific data. The first one is consumed by. This should be set to reporting. Next, application should be set to the desired application. This would be the same application the query is set on. It's a good suggestion to use an already existing object structure as a reference with the same base object when creating a new one. Once the object structure has been created, it's necessary to grant access to this object structure for a security group. This is done in the Report Administration application via the left-hand More Actions menu, selecting Set Report Object Structure Security. In the resulting dialog, search for the object structure created and ensure to grant access to the intended security group that will be using the Start Center. Now we've talked about queries and object structures, we can go into more detail on the result set portlet. This is often the most focused on part of a Start Center. As stated before, a user's organization can grant or revoke access to editing a portlet. so some users may not have access to these changes. After setting the name and description of the result set portlet, an application must be chosen. An object structure and query must be set up on the application before it'll show up in the list of available applications. Then the query and object structures are required. The object structure will default when the application is chosen, but it can be changed. Changing the object structure will change which objects show up on the object list on the left-hand side. Each object can be selected to expand the available fields list. Changing the query will change the records that show up in the portlet after configuration. Once the desired query and object structure have been selected, choose the fields that should appear in the portlet. It is recommended to only select 3 to 5 fields, otherwise the portlet will become cluttered with information. There are 2 other tabs we're going to take a look at for the result set portlet. The first one is chart options. There are 3 required fields on this tab. Make the chart view default, choose between bar and pie charts, and select the field the chart will be based on, called Display By. When on the main Start Center view, the bottom left of the result set portlet has a chart view button that will change to the chart. This will give a pop-up the first time and ask for those required 3 fields. There are also 2 non-required fields that allow naming the legends of the attribute and value columns. The legend for the attribute will display over the different record names that attribute has, such as WO101 or PM222. The legend for the value will be the numeric value associated with that attribute record. The chart will show the value of each attribute record as a count and as a percentage of the whole. Next, we have the Color Options tab. This changes the color of a record's entire row depending on the expression given. For a given condition attribute chosen, there are 3 fields to fill: expression, expression value, and color. The field used in the expression value can be text or numeric, but it must be constant. Maximo variables such as date cannot be used. Multiple expressions, each with an associated color coding, can be set up for a given condition attribute. Now we're going to take a look at applying Start Center templates. Applying Start Center templates is done in the Security Groups application. This is where Start Centers are applied and how users get access to edit their own Start Centers. On the main Group tab is where the Start Center template is chosen. Only one template can be set per security group. If users are associated with multiple security groups, they may have multiple Start Centers shown as tabs. They will not see multiple of the same Start Center. In security groups on the Applications tab, we can take a look at the options for the Start Center application. These options do not relate to the template or portlet editing. Those have their own applications in security groups. The only 2 options to focus on here are Read Modify, allowing users to view the Start Center, and can Update Start Center, allowing them to use the Update Start Center button, which means refreshing the Start Center to reflect updates made to the template. The other options are more general use. Can log in during admin mode, allows users to log in when admin mode is turned on. Default information, personal information, and set or modify a signature key. Decide if the user can see these options in the top right profile button in Maximo Manage. In security groups, the layout and configuration application gives the user access to the modify existing template and create new template buttons. All the portlets have their own applications in security groups, except for bulletin board. This has a full application, so its options here do not relate to the portlet, but the application itself. Each portlet application has only two options: read modify, which gives a user access to modify that portlet type, and hide portlet, which will hide all of this type of portlet from the user on any Start Center. Be careful when granting all options on the portlet applications. In most cases, granting all options would give the user the maximum access. However, with portlet applications, the second option will hide the portlet. Now we're going to take a look at some best practices for Start Centers. Here's some advice to keep Start Centers running smoothly, allowing efficient use by users. Make the content relevant to the users. Display records that require their attention. Limit the number of query-based portlets. Leverage indexes, and limit user configuration options. I'll also go over some best practices for queries. Making sure content on a Start Center is relevant to users is done by limiting the number of columns on result sets and being selective with quick insert portlets. Limiting the number of columns in result sets keeps the screen from being cluttered and makes it easier to identify the required information to make decisions. For the quick insert portlet, users don't need this setup for every record they might create. Limiting this portlet will lower the chance of users creating accidental records, which creates waste in the database and takes up space. When using workflow in the environment, displaying records that require a user's attention is an important part of Start Centers. It's highly recommended to use the inbox assignment portlet when workflows are used, allowing users to quickly see what records need their attention. Limiting the number of query-based portlets is crucial for efficient Start Centers. These include KPI list, KPI graph, and result set. The suggested amount is 4 or less query-based portlets. These portlets wait until all queries are complete before any of them finish loading. It's recommended if many queries are required to spread them across different Start Centers. Users having different Start Centers for separate topics is much better than having everything they need on one large Start Center that takes a long time to load. Leveraging indexes on the portlet tables reduces the time it takes for query-based portlets to complete. An index is a data structure that improves the speed of data retrieval operations on a database. It creates a second instance of the given table that is sorted by the index field. When looking through the table again, it's already sorted, so finding data is faster. The portlet tables should each be indexed on the layout ID attribute. Indexing does require more space in the environment to save the sorted field. Limiting the user's configuration options can help restrict them from creating slow or encumbered Start Centers. And if they change a lot when an administrator updates the template, all those changes will be lost. Some users may not use best practices for queries, creating slow or large queries or adding many portlets, which makes their Start Center really slow. However, fully blocking users from editing their own Start Centers is not recommended. Editing their own Start Centers gives users access to make slight adjustments from the template that could be a great improvement. These improvements could be something most other users do not want to see, or a temporary change that is faster than having to reach out to an administrator to change the template. When opening an application, a default query is used to hide historic data or records that have been finished and retired. This removes records most people would not want to look at from the query. Each application has its own select few default query attributes that are used to build out the default query. This can be viewed when first opening an application and going to the quick search menu and clicking on Where clause. This hides records that you don't expect to show up in your query, such as old historical records. We talked earlier about using the list view or more search fields to create queries. When selecting multiple options for a single attribute, Maximo will set up an OR statement repeating that same attribute. Instead, use an IN statement to make the search more efficient. For example, I want records in status approved, canceled, and closed. If I select these options from the list view, Maximo creates a statement for me. Status equals approved, or status equals canceled, or status equals closed. To improve this, we change it to a membership condition using the IN statement, such as status in approved, canceled, closed. Whenever a user creates a query with join, often select star is used. This is not required when joining. Using select one will reduce the time it takes to return to the original statement. An example is shown in the slide. Now we're going to do a quick demonstration. We're going to go into Maximo Manage and we're going to edit a few portlets to start. It'll just be a moment as I switch to the Maximo Manage screen. And I'm going to log back in as my user. All right, so you can see I've logged in. These are the menus on the left-hand side. We're going to ignore these for the time being. And this is the Maximo Manage Start Center. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make changes to my own personal Start Center. And this is going to be on the Maintenance tab. So I'm going to edit my own personal instance of the Maintenance Start Center. The changes I make here are not going to be visible by all users. They're just going to be visible to me when I log in. So let's say I like to access the Assets application. It's a bit of work to go through the side menu, find assets. So I want to be able to do this with a simple click. I'm going to go into the favorite applications portlet. I'm going to make some changes. So I'm going to hover over the right upper side. You can see that when I hover over the pencil icon, it says edit portlet. So I'm going to do that. You can see we have our portlet name. We're going to be showing the Maximo Classic application, and these are the three we have already. So I'm going to pull up Assets. I'm going to click the Actions drop down, and I'm going to select the Assets application. So I'm going to click the checkbox to select Assets and click OK. And we want the order to be labor reporting, assets, work orders, and quick reporting. Now that I'm happy with my changes, I go to Actions and I click Finished. You can see we now have assets in my favorite applications portlet, and it shows up in the order that I desired. So I'm going to see this set up on my Maintenance Start Center when I log in to Maximo. Now, we're not done making changes. There's one other thing that I want to modify. I have a result set here, and it's showing work orders. you can see that we have the 4 columns: description, priority, status, and the work order identifier. I want to add another column. I want to add the status date to see when that status was changed. I also want to change the color coding. So right now you can see that it appears that everything with the priority of 1 is red. I want to change it and make it according to status. So I want status of waiting on approval to show up as red instead. I'm going to hover over the right-hand side, click Edit Portlet. You can see we have the options, the display name, we have our application, work order tracking, and the associated object structure. This is going to be work order details by default, which was kept. You can see we also have another option. If we chose that, it would change the objects that show up in our object list. And as we navigate through the list, right now it's on work order, which is the top level. But if I click job plans, you can see that the available fields change, and these will be the fields that are on the child job plan object. So I'm going to go back up to the top, and I also, lastly, the query will filter what records show up in my portlet. So this is what determines those 10 or 12 records that we were seeing in my Start Center. So we wanted to add status date. So I'm going to look up that field, status date. You can see I've done that before. I'm going to select it with a checkbox. Go to Actions and Add Selected. And I'm going to keep the order as is for now. And I'm going to save this change. Now, I also wanted to change the color coding, so I'm going to go to Color Options. You can see right now it's set up on the low priority attribute. Let's change that. Let's make it on the status attribute, and I'm going to expand the details. The expression equal to, that can stay, and when status equals waiting on approval. So I'm going to change this to waiting on approval. And let's keep the color for that as red. You can see we have a few different options if we click the drop down. Now that was the last change I wanted to make, so I'm going to click Finished. And that's going to save the changes and take me back to the Start Center. You can see that we've added status date. Obviously, you probably want to go back and switch up the order that these columns show up. And the color coding is now based on status, waiting on approval. Now just keep in mind, we have some other portlets on here. We have bulletin board, as we talked about. We have quick insert. I'm going to, and we also have the inbox and assignment portlet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the maintenance template just to show that these changes have not been reflected. So if I want to do that, I find that via the Modify Existing Templates action. That's in the very top right. You hover over the pencil, and we're going to pull up the maintenance template. So I'm going to filter maintenance. I'm going to choose a maintenance template. You can see it shows up in another tab right next to our original, my personal instance of the maintenance. You can see that the changes I made, so the first change I made on my personal Start Center, adding assets, that's not showing up here, and you can see that the new column I added and the changed color coding, that's not reflected on the template either. So the template is essentially the Start Center that is typically modified by the administrator, and it'll propagate to all users. So the first thing we're going to do on our template, let's add an action to quick insert. We want all users with a maintenance template to have the option to create a service request in addition to a work order. So I'm going to hover over Edit Portlet. You can see there's options here, change the display name, and as well as all the actions. So I'm going to add a new action. And there's quite a few, so let's filter by the service request application. New service request. I'm going to choose that, and I'm going to change the wording. So let's just put create SR, and we'll leave the order. Let's put it like this. I believe it defaults to alphabetical, but let's just have a fixed order. So now that I'm happy with this, I select finished. And you can see that create SR is the first option that shows up in my quick insert portlet. Now I'm just going to navigate through some other options available. I'm going to show this on the template, but you should also be able to do this on your personal Start Center. So the first one is changing the content and layout. This button in the top right. You can see there's the layout, which is typically narrow wide, but you can also have the option to have the two sections show up as equal width or wide narrow. Our description, which is maintenance, and then you can see that we can choose content for the left and right columns. So favorite applications, quick insert, and then the three portlets that we're seeing on the right. And we also have the option to add or remove portlets and change what order they show up on. If I wanted to add a portlet to the left column, I click select content and choose a portlet from here. You can see it also has a suggested format. So typically favorite applications, report list, those show up on a narrow column, whereas something like result set, you want to have a wide layout for that. So I'm not making any changes here. I'm going to click cancel and cancel. And then other options we have, delete, which we don't want to do for this template, and cancel changes. So let's say I made some edits and then I thought, okay, never mind. I can click cancel changes to basically discard that modification. What we're going to do is we're going to save the template with the change that we made. So having create SR available from quick insert. So I'm going to click save. And that closed the template, and we got a success message here. So that tab has been closed. I go back to my personal maintenance template. You can see that the option I added isn't here in the quick insert, and we still have those changes we made before of adding assets and the column and the color coding. So if I want those changes made on the template to be reflected, I have to update my Start Center. However, this also wipes out those personal changes I made for myself. So I'm going to opt to go ahead and update my personal Start Center. I'm going to get a prompt, click yes. And you can see that the custom change I made, so new column, color coding, that got wiped out. The result set looks the same as before. And you can see that the assets application isn't here anymore, but we do have create SR in our quick insert. Now, the next thing I want to walk through is creating a new template. As I mentioned, it's typically done by administrators or users with higher permissions. So I'm going to click Create New Template. That was the plus icon in the top right. I'm going to leave the layout as narrow wide, and we're going to call this, I'll just call this my template. And I'm going to add favorite applications to the left-hand side. And I'm going to add a result set on the right-hand side. Click Finished, and you can see we have my template with these two portlets. So the first thing I want to do on this new template, I want to set up my favorite applications. As it prompts me, I click Edit, and we're going to tell it we want Maximo Classic applications here. So the first application I want to show up is Assets. So let's pull that from the dialog box, and let's have that show up first. Now let's also choose the work order tracking application. Work order tracking, and click OK, have that second, and I'm going to click Finished. You can see that that's been set up. Now I'm going to go to the result set. I'm going to edit my portlet, keep the name. I want my application to be work order tracking, so I'm going to choose that from the dialog. It's going to take a moment. You can see that the default object structure has been populated. I can also go in and change it. So if you just keep an eye on the object list, when I choose this object structure, the child objects are a little bit different. So that's how the object structure affects which objects are available. I'm going to go back to the default one, and I'm going to choose my query, which filters what information I'm going to see. I'm going to click this one that I created, and I want to have 3 columns here. I want to be able to see the work order identifier. I'm just going to search work order and add selected. I also want to see the description. Check, add selected, and I want to see the status. So I think we'll get a few different entries. Status, let's go status date. All right, and, let's also add status. Or here, perfect. Add selected, and I'm happy with this setup. So I'm going to click Finished, and then you're going to see the result set with my work orders, and these 5 appear based on the query I selected, and we have our columns here. Now I'm happy with this template, so I'm going to save it. But because I just had the template open for editing, I'm not going to see it on my personal Start Center. I have to assign it to a group. So I'm going to click Save in the top right. It's going to disappear. And then I'll walk through assigning it to a security group. It'll just take a moment. It's been saved. So it was called My Template. I'm going to go to the Security Groups application. And I can search for the group I want here or via the magnifying glass. Find group. I'm gonna look for the everyone group. They already have a Start Center template assigned. For the purpose of the demo, I'm gonna change that and look up my template. Perfect. So I'm gonna save changes, and as you might know, security group changes do not reflect until you log out and back in again. So I'm going to do that. and it should just take a second to load, but you'll see a tab with my template. So I'm part of the everyone group, and you can see it says new templates no longer available. You can see that I have these two portlets as I set up. So now this is my personal instance of the Start Center. So that's it for the demo, and I'm going to switch back to the presentation. And we have a little bit of time for a Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop that in the chat, and LK will read them out to me.
Thanks, Nadia. I don't see any questions in the chat or question box. I will give it 2 more minutes. If anyone has questions, then we will address them, but it doesn't seem like anyone does. So I think, yeah, I think we can close it out.
Okay.
Yeah. So with that,
Okay.
we conclude our webinar. I want to again thank our speaker, Nadia, for joining us today, as well as you, our attendees, for being here. Reach out to any of the presenters or the team at Cohesive via our website or via LinkedIn. Note we have all the previous webinars available on YouTube. The recording of this webinar will also be made available to you on our channel. That is a wrap for today's webinar, but please register and join us for our upcoming webinar on February 20th with the topic Bypass Management. Nadia, thank you again, and I wish everyone a great day.
Thanks, everyone.